After giving up a grand total of just 4 goals through the first 2 games of the series, Stuart Skinner gave up 4 last game, including a real stinker as far as the game winner. So where do the Oilers go from here? Let's bring in Ryan Rishaug. Ryan, there was some question mark, in my mind at least, about whether Skinner would get to start again. We saw last round against the Vancouver Canucks. He had a stinker in Game 3. The Canucks led 2-1 in the series. The Oil switched to Calvin Pickard while he found his game. I thought maybe that would happen again this time. He had a stinker in Game 3, Stu Skinner did. I thought maybe now with the Stars up 2-1, they'd go to Calvin Pickard again, but that's not the case.
No, it's not. They're going. I asked Chris Knobloch. They're going back to Stuart Skinner in game number 4. I feel like we have this conversation every round, Gino. I feel like you and I get into the goaltending discussion every single round, and maybe therein lies the bigger problem. But I think this is the right decision, Gino. I think that when a goaltender's play gets in the way of your team being able to win, in other words, if your team is playing at a level where they clearly could probably grab that game and your goalie gets in the way, I think it's time to really consider making a switch, especially if it's getting away from your number one guy. I don't think that's what happened last game. You classified it as a stinker. I would classify the 4th goal as one that he would definitely want back. I wouldn't classify the whole game that way. I thought that Skinner made some really good saves, in particular when the game was tied 3-3. I thought he made some clutch saves. So it was more the team for me in Game 3 than Skinner, so I think it's the right decision to stick with him. But again, you and I have been at odds on this one a couple of times, my friend. What do you think?
Well, I think that Skinner himself understands what's going on right now. At least he's being honest about the fact that he says, I got to make that save on that 4th shot. And the main thing is I can't be letting in that many goals a game, which is absolutely the truth. You cannot give up 4 goals to the Dallas Stars, a team that could play as well defensively and have got Jake Oettinger in net. The Oil just cannot find themselves in that kind of hole. So that's why I'm saying maybe Calvin Pickard comes in for even 1 game, gives them a bit of a respite. That changes the mindset of the Oilers as a team. But you don't think that would work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a crazy idea. Calvin Pickard has played well when he went in. So they have a very usable goaltender sitting there. But I think that Stuart Skinner, his game over the last few games has been pretty sharp. And I think that I think the Oilers believe if they're going to win Stanley Cup this year, it's going to be with Stuart Skinner in net. So I think he's going to have a little bit more rope here than maybe what you're suggesting. Now, if he doesn't play too well in this next game, or if there's ones that they don't love against him in this next game, then all bets are off because then they're in a real tight spot. But I think it's the right call for now, Gino, but I know for a fact if it's not, I'll be hearing about it after the next game.
You will. Okay. Ryan, I got to ask you about these great starts by the Oilers and then this horrible fades. Game 2, the Oilers outshoot the Stars 16-4 in the first period. Then after that, they get outshot, outscored, they lose the game. Game 3, they get a 2-0 lead. And then after that, they get outshot, they lose the game. What is going on? How, in a span of 3 minutes and 33 seconds, does a team as good as the Edmonton Oilers, a Final Four team, give up 3 goals in that span and just fade after a great start again?
2 words: human nature. I mean, the Oilers are, they're human, and they rest on their laurels a little bit, Gino. They come out and they play a great first period, and they feel good about things, I'm sure, and then Dallas pushes back. And the Oilers have this tendency to kind of sit back and watch Dallas take over. It feels to me like individually they're not taking it upon themselves as individuals to go out and stem the tide and change the momentum. They're kind of just, it's happening around them and they're watching. Because as a player, I would assume you hop the boards and you're thinking, what can I do to go get some of this back? And it's in the details. It's in making smart plays at your blue line, making sure your dumps go into the corner and the goalie doesn't get it, making sure you're finishing checks when you can, like the real fundamentals, right? And they seem to get away from those and allow Dallas to dictate play. And I think there's some human nature in going up a couple of goals and just naturally sitting back a little bit. And I think they really need to buck that because it's been an issue for them in these playoffs. It's been an issue for them in this series. But it really comes down to each individual when it's happening, hopping over the boards and deciding, I got to do something myself right now to try and change this momentum instead of just kind of waiting for the group to do it.
Speaking of change momentum, you had an interesting conversation with Evander Kane. He leads all the playoffs with 35 penalty minutes. So there's no doubt what he would like to see happen in this series. Tell me about the conversation you had with him, and is he onto something?
Yeah, so I asked about what I pointed out was that this has been a very friendly series. I mean, there's no scrums after the whistles, there's no animosity, there's not much bad blood. We're not seeing a ton of really big hits. There's the odd one here or there. But really, the temperature of this thing, if Vancouver, it was cranked up to a 7 or 8 out of 10, this is like a 3. I mean, there's nothing. And I believe that plays right into Dallas's hands, right? Dallas is one of the least penalized teams during the year. They're the least penalized team in the playoffs. They don't want the refs to even remember they have whistles, the Dallas Stars, right? They do not want to take penalties. And I think that style of play really falls in Dallas's favor because, and as Vander Kane said when I asked him this, he said to kind of lull them to sleep a little bit. Like that's the way Dallas wants to play and that the Oilers are maybe getting lulled into that. He feels there's more that they can do physically to try and up the temperature. He thinks that probably benefits his group more than it would the Dallas Stars, and I agree. I think that the Oilers are getting lulled into a bit of a no-hitter at times. Now, in fairness, they did dominate the hit stat in the last game. In the first period, they had almost as many hits as they did the entire game 2. So I've seen when the Oilers turn up the temperature physically that it can work, and I think Kane probably agrees, but it's about getting the group to buy in and do it consistently, Gino.
Any way to explain what happened to Connor McDavid last game? Because he comes out of the gate like he was shot out of a cannon. A goal and an assist. He was on fire. He was by far the best player on the ice in the first period. The speed was McDavid-type speed. And then all of a sudden he faded. Did something happen to him, or did the Stars do something to slow him down?
So I think when the Oilers are pushing as a group, McDavid leads the charge. He's noticeable, he stands out, and he's sort of doing those McDavid-esque things. When the Dallas Stars wake up, and when they get to their game, they're much better at absorbing the speed, absorbing the rush, shutting down the best opportunities. I think what we're going to find in this series, Gino, is when Dallas is playing well, McDavid's not going to dominate. He's just not going to be able to against these quality lines, but more importantly against this blue line. Like they've got Lindell and Heiskanen playing together against McDavid. I mean, Esa Lindell is, you might as well call him a racer Lindell. He's one of the really, really underappreciated shutdown defensemen in the league. And then you got Heiskanen, who's as mobile as anybody. So McDavid's working against those guys. When Dallas is playing well, it's going to be more about McDavid finding moments, right? Going out there and working hard and good habits, and he's going to blend in with the rest a little bit. We're in the Final Four. The hockey is great hockey. But then he'll use his greatness to find moments. And that's what they're having a tough time doing, Gino, and really evidence the fact that they're having trouble closing out games. You know, I don't think they've closed out a game when they're tied heading into the third period here, and that's not a great trait. So fair question on McDavid, but I think it has a lot to do with Dallas when they're on their game, just how hard it is for him.
We haven't spoken a lot about Darnell Nurse, not just in this series, but in these playoffs at all. He's a -2 last game. He's a -12 in the 15 playoff games. That's by far the worst of any player in these playoffs. Yeah. He was asked about, that 3-minute and 33-second span where they gave up the 3 goals. And he just said, it's hockey. It happens. What do you think is happening with Darnell Nurse? Or are we just now, as a nation, seeing the way Nurse has played all season long?
So as for his comments after the game, Darnell Nurse is not a player that's going to stand there like Stuart Skinner and run through a blow-by-blow of what happened and what the mistakes were. And he's not going to engage in that kind of dialogue with the media. He tends to be a little bit more guarded, which is fine. That's completely up to him, and that's his choice. So I wasn't expecting a lot more from Nurse post-game necessarily. He hasn't really been that way this year. Bottom line, Darnell Nurse was a defenseman who took more minutes than anybody and had all sorts of responsibility not too long ago. And that's not the game and the responsibility level that he has anymore. His minutes have really varied throughout these playoffs. Matthias Ekholm is very clearly the number one left shot defenseman on this team. Evan Bouchard, his partner, they're very clearly the top pairing. And Darnell Nurse has had some trouble. The plus minus is not great. Chris Knobloch was asked about that today. He said he doesn't necessarily love that stat, but he admitted that there's more there for Darnell Nurse. I find he tends to back in a little bit too much, Gino. When things get a little crazy around him, he tends to collapse back on his net and leave lots of space in front of him. I think that's caused him some troubles. I find he's not nearly as menacing a player as he used to be. I mean, when we used to talk about Darnell Nurse, he was feared. And that element of his game has kind of come out of his game for whatever reason. And that was this regular season as well, and certainly here in these playoffs. So he's not as ferocious. He's not playing the same minutes as he was before, and he's on for a lot of goals against. This is a tough turn for the Oilers because, as you know, Gino, he eats up a huge piece of their salary cap. And I think for them to get to where they want to go, Darnell Nurse needs to be on the other side of this thing, playing really excellent hockey for them, because while he is average or below average, it's going to be hard for them when the competition gets this stiff.
Yeah, to your point about finances, he's the second highest paid defenseman still in these playoffs. They just need to get more from him. Well, this is the first time the Oilers have lost back-to-back games in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They got to turn that around Wednesday night in Edmonton. Otherwise, the hole becomes too deep to climb out of. Ryan Rishaug from Edmonton teeing up Game 4 between the Oilers and the Dallas Stars.